first film that actually he mentions quite a lot is Wizard of Oz.
And it was the first time that he went to the cinema, and he found it a completely overwhelming experience and crawled under the seat, I think, at one point, or wanted to kind of run from the cinema. The whole idea of Dorothy travelling, as she does, over the rainbow to this magical, colourful place. I have a lot of echoes in Derek's life of that, because he created an over-the-rainbow place to live in very often.
Derek Jarman was a painter, a theatre designer, a writer, a gardener, a nurturer of raw young talent, a gay rights activist, and a man who lived his last years battling against AIDS. He was also far and away the most imaginative, innovative filmmaker in Britain during the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. One who refused to shy away from controversy in films such as Sebastian and The Last of England. A truly extraordinary talent, the like of which we may never see again.
His idea of England was an idea of England that perhaps never existed. It's a wonderful, beautiful countryside, unspoiled, with good, clean, nice people.
Somewhere there's a kind of, with a small c, there's a conservatism in Derek that sits alongside his iconoclasm.
I thought film was, you know, you had a wide shot and a close-up and, you know, people talk normally and everything like that. Derek's films were like, it was pop art to me, really.
He had the most highly developed visual imagination I've ever come across.
I said, now Derek, I think we've got to shock your fans with this film. And he said, what do you mean? Yes, let's shock them. What do you mean? I said, no bums and willies at all.
If people say, it's, you know, Derek was eccentric, what is the centre? What are we talking about? Off-centre? Thank God.
Derek was in many ways a sexual and political outlaw.
He had an extraordinary charisma. He was a drama queen.
We canonised St. Derek for all his contributions to the arts, for speaking out, for demonstrating, and for his fabulously sexy nose.
Michael Derek Elworthy Jarman was born into an RAF family in war-torn Britain in 1942. By the end of his first decade, his future self was already clearly defined.
What were his interests, as far as you can remember? What were his interests as a child?
Yeah, I suppose flowers and architecture, yes. Yes, the sandcastles wouldn't be ordinary sandcastles. They would be vast.
I love the idea of him doing a kind of, you know, devil set in the sand.
I think it was his 3rd or 4th birthday, his parents bought him a book called Beautiful Flowers and How to Grow Them. I think that was the title. It was a fairly serious horticultural book with these plates of flowers.
And we used to build houses and, well, dens, if we were living anywhere where there was a wood or a field behind.
I think he was a very curious, lively, polite child, and a slightly unusual one too, I think, in that I think he had quite a rich internal life.
I remember going to Italy with him. I went many times to Italy with him, and he would always end up having some reverie about having been there as a child, and the smell of mimosa, which was this, you know, his divine memory, and his idea of himself of having been a Mediterranean child was very dear to him.
The family were moving around a lot from RAF patch to RAF patch, and his father was sent out immediately after the war to Italy, and they were quartered on the shores of Lake Maggiore in a rather splendid old house. And there was this young man, one assumes, in his late teens, early 20s, who would take Derek out onto the lake with him. His beauty and his youth imprinted itself very vividly on him, and is a kind of, maybe a template for a lot of the men in Derek's life.
Derek used to spend his childhood or youth in Pakistan, and there was an Air Force base about 2.5 miles from where I used to stay. I said to him, do you realize that not far from that region is a big province in Pakistan where most of the people are bisexual. In fact, it's well known that this particular tribe is very gay, and he just screamed with laughter. He said, "You mean I could have had fun?" I said, "Well, you could have."
Derek's father was quite a reserved person and not necessarily the easiest of people socially.
He certainly wasn't somebody who used to beat us or anything like that. He was an unusual person, being a New Zealander maybe, and finding himself in England and having to conform and fit in.
And he became, as people like that often do, more English than the English, and I think that's an important factor in the family story. In the Second World War, he was an RAF pilot, he was a bomber pilot, and ultimately a pathfinder. And that's the pilot who flies ahead and lays down the flares and the paths for the bombers.
We always think he went a bit potty because of his bombing raids.
He was much closer to his mother. Her femininity, her softness as opposed maybe to his father's hardness was something that he related to much more.
She seemed terribly happy. She didn't really do anything when she was older. She followed father around, obviously. There was a lot of entertaining, but she didn't have her own work. But she could draw beautifully because she made all her own clothes. She taught me how to make clothes, and she would always do a drawing of what she was going to make first.
And then there was boarding school. How did that affect Derek?
He hated it, I think. He absolutely hated it. He hated Camford.
He suffered from that kind of trauma of being, just withdrawn from the home. The school was very sporty, was quite outdoors. I mean, the ethos of the school wasn't something that he felt particularly comfortable.
And I think he had to box at one stage. If you could imagine Derek boxing. He had to box, and I think it was the not being able to go out. He always sensed the enclosures, being in RAF camps. He always referred to the barbed wire. That comes into all his films as well, doesn't it? He seems to, again, have gloomy places and barbed wire, and especially, I suppose, The Last of England.
And I think he was very interested in how the individual survives any environment, and the loneliness that any kind of enclosed environment can instill. That was, I suppose you could say, that was a theme for him. It was a very natural theme.
When he was growing up, he used to laugh at all the Air Force parties and tennis on the lawn and cucumber sandwiches and all that stuff. I mean, it used to make him giggle. And he said it was a total liberation to break away from that world. And what enabled him to make the break was his sexuality.